welcome back to the Masters of the Universe Classics Director's Commentary with me, your host, Scott ToyGuru Neitlich, brand manager of the line, and today we're jumping in by talking about unreleased figures from the old days. Lots of lines had it, like superpowers and even, well, Star Wars, in the sense of prototypes that were never released. Heck, some of the prototypes that never come out become legendary, like this Boba Fett figure. If you actually want to learn more about toys that never got put out, Blake Wright wrote an amazing book. In fact, I think he's on his third volume at this point, called Toys That Time Forgot, which spotlights a ton of really awesome toys that never came out in the 1980s, well, and some in the 70s and 90s as well. But he does an amazing job on this book. In fact, quick plug, if you want to hear an interview with him, click on the link above for episode 3 of the Toy Lines podcast. They do a great job of giving you everything you need to know about being a geek for the upcoming week. All right, so talking about prototypes for Masters of the Universe specifically, there were quite a few characters in the vintage line, like Gygor here, that were, I guess, not tooled up, but, put together, like the original He-Man trio, not intended for retail release. Or then there's characters like Hero, who was shown in the Mattel catalog for 1987, but never got released. And because of this image, fans have, of course, wanted this figure for years. And we finally were able to do this in Masters of the Universe Classics. He was our second San Diego Comic-Con item, the first one after we had launched the line. King Grayskull kicked it off, but he was kind of the first figure within the line. And, it was a great figure because since you could never have him in the vintage line, that was what Classics was all about. Super 7 also did an amazing figure recreating not only the figure but the packaging of what he would have looked like had he been released in 1987. And honestly, I think this is kind of the crowning achievement of Super 7's Masters of the Universe work. This and the Eldor figure are amazing. You should totally check them out. I think they're still on Amazon for like $20. But yeah, Hero was kind of legendary for not being released. And much like the Masters of the Universe line, the She-Ra Princess of Power line also had some unreleased items that were shown in various forms. And Classics is all about that. Much like we wanted to get to all of the released figures, we wanted to pay homage to unreleased things. And Princess of Power had no shortage of this, from things like the unreleased fashions that were going to be different outfits for She-Ra and her friends, kind of like how Barbie has different outfits, as the line headed more and more down the doll alleyway, as well as some accessories and vehicles like the bubble carriage that was also shown in the licensor kit. That was that previous image, and this is what the toy was going to look like. But then there's the notorious Star Sisters, the Star Sisters, Jewel Star, Starla, and Tall Star. Yup, these were the infamous unmade prototypes, much like Hero. They were shown in the catalog as the Star Sisters with their pet Glory Bird. And the prototypes have, other images of them have shown up over the years, as well as fan customs of what the prototypes could look like. But they were very similar to Hero in the sense that they were shown in the catalog, everybody saw them, a lot of people knew about them, but they never got released. And they sort of faded into unmade toy history. And unlike Hero, though, they actually have a little bit of a unique history because they weren't limited to just being shown in the Mattel catalog. The images of the dolls, of course, were different from how they were portrayed in other media. The dolls had some action features. Starla's back light would pop up and down, showing that, she could command the powers of light. Jewel Star would collapse into a jewel or a rock, similar to Rock-On and Stondar from the MOTU line, and Tall Star could get tall, because, that's what Tall Star does. She had kind of super stretching abilities. Interesting, her stretching was actually based on the Burple, or at least it used the same technology as the Burple. Remember this? It was that really cool container from the 80s that could bend and twist and expand, so that, as you had more and more cereal or less and less, you could either push it down or pull it up, and it was kind of a customizable Tupperware solution. I don't know why this went away. It was really cool. I remember we had these. They were like so much fun to play with. And I think they were called burples because they made that sound when you crunched it up and down. It was like burple, burple. Okay, I'm not a sound effect guy, but they were cool. And you can see that this same sort of ribbed plastic technology was used for Tall Star in her arms and legs and neck. and that was how she stretched. So like I mentioned, Hero had very limited appearances in the vintage line. He appeared in the catalog, he appeared on the infamous knitting pattern guide, and there were some images of the pre-production prototypes, concept art that have surfaced over the years. But as far as his official continuity appearances, well, he was pretty much limited to one single panel in one mini-comic where he was only shown in shadow, and that was hinted that he was going to be the star of the next mini-comic, but that never came out. The Star Sisters, on the other hand, well, they were the stars of the show. They were kind of all over the place, meaning they were shown a lot, and for toys that were never released, they were prominent in the 87 style guide because, the style guide was prepared assuming that they were going to be coming out, and included their pet Glory Bird and all three sisters. In fact, not only did they get a group shot showing them as a team, but they each got their individual page. So, Jewel Star shining with her pink, and Tall Star stretched out with her super stretchy Plastic Man, Mr. Fantastic kind of powers. There aren't that many stretchy female characters in pop culture. Well, I guess Mrs. Incredible now. And then, of course, Starla with her ability to control light and be a star. I don't know. I don't think she sings and dances. But yeah, they each had their own individual page in the licensor kit. They were also featured on cross-sell art that came out as figures that were going to be new and available soon, as well as the She-Ra Princess of Power magazine, which this is probably one of their most famous still images, had the three Star Sisters, Glory Bird, but as far as content, it also included a detailed bio of the figures, giving their history about how they were lost in a cave and then released by She-Ra, and there was a whole legend, and this is what we used to write the bio for the Classics line. So yeah, the story kind of went on and on. They had a whole section in the She-Ra magazine back in the day where the three sisters teamed up and fought against Catra and Entrapta, and eventually, She-Ra became their sort of savior, helping them out of their prison, their cave prison, and then they became her allies. And Filmation. Yep, for figures that never got released, that showed up in licensing guides and cross-sells and magazines, they also showed up in a Filmation episode, all three sisters. They had pretty prominent screen time. It was pretty much Mattel asking Filmation to deliberately feature them because they wanted to show off the action features and the dolls for the upcoming figure release. So it was natural they would use Filmation as a marketing tool to advertise that new characters were on their way. And while they had a prominent part in the episode, showing off all of their powers on screen, still, the figures never came out. But a lot of people knew about them because they showed up in animation. So when it came to classics, well, there was a real big debate of, well, how do we do them? Do we make them look like the dolls? Do we make them look like Filmation? Do we make them look like the style guide? And since most of the other POP figures were following the style guide look, which was also kind of the Filmation look, that absolutely won out. So the Horsemen really used this image from the magazine that also had their bio, or their legend on it, and we really did leave it to the Horsemen on this kind of stuff. But it was definitely influenced by the Filmation look versus the doll look, since these weren't going to be dolls, these were going to be action figures, which is how the She-Ra line was originally supposed to be anyway. But they got transformed actually into action figures through Classics, along with Glory Bird, which was great because the whole line was meant to be action figures, and now finally not only could you get Star Sister toys, but they were released as figures. And I remember Terry, who was the designer at this time, was so excited because he got to use a whole different color palette that he'd never used before. He was working in boys' toys and didn't do much with pinks and light blues and purples. I mean, occasionally you'd get, some of these colors, but I remember he said he had to go over to the girls' group to ask them where they kept the glitter paint because he'd never used it before. And he was really excited to paint them up and to work on the prototypes because this is probably the, most girly toys we had done. Now, we couldn't do the action features of two of the dolls because that would have required tooling and mechanisms, but for Tall Star, because her powers were stretching, it was easy to do snap-on parts. So as long as, it didn't require internal tooling of a mechanism, snap-on parts like doing an extra neck piece was pretty easy to do. So yeah, so she did get sort of her action features by giving her extra parts that would snap into her legs, snap into her arms, and snap onto her neck, and you could even pile up the arm pieces to give her an even longer neck if you really wanted to. So she could stand literally head and shoulders above the other Star Sisters and above other Masters of the Universe Classics figures, which would replicate what would have been her vintage action feature. So, cool. Glorybird, of course, can't do Star Sisters without Glorybird, so here is the Classics version of their pet bird on a brand new perch with a new kind of headdress and feather cap, which replicated what the vintage toy was going to look like. It would have used, of course, the existing eagle sculpt for Zor and Screech with a new stand and cast in pink with the feathers and the neck piece added. It was a little bit more, I think it was vac metal gold around the neck. And for longtime viewers of this channel, you may also know that this tool originally started in the vintage line with Big Jim's eagle, which is why the eagle from the vintage line, Zor and Screech, are so big. In Classics, the decision was made to make the eagles more proportionally sized to the figures, like they were in some of the entertainment. And once we had this eagle tool, of course, we used it over and over again, even in DCU Classics a few times. Beast Boys one, and the Wonder Twins eagle form is in there. So yeah, that eagle tool got used a lot. And of course, I do need to throw a nod to the Horsemen's other line, their internal line, the Mythic Legions. They did a line of bird characters. I mean, God, that chicken one is amazing. And for the eagle sculpt, they did some really cool repaints where they repainted the Mythic Legion's eagle as sort of Screech, and then did him again in Zor colors. I mean, this isn't Zor, but it's, I mean, you can definitely see the homage. And of course, they had to do a pink one that was an homage to Glorybird, and that is just, kick-ass. That is, I mean, look at that face. That is awesome. So that was the transformation of these never-before-done figures that were prototypes, Filmation stars, licensor kit stars, magazine stars, but never had a toy in the vintage days. And now we could give them their first ever toy in Masters of the Universe Classics. And this, I think, this was our first deluxe 3-pack, which was a little expensive because it was, 3 figures, the price of 1 figure times 3, plus you got Glorybird. So it needed a new structure, but, we got a brand new bio based on the magazine legend, as well as some other Princess of Power figures in the cross-sell. We always made the cross-sell kind of related characters. Now, I should add, when we sold the subscription at San Diego Comic-Con, we always tried to have what were called bell cow figures, meaning figures that were going to draw a subscription that, fans would want to sign up for the year based on this figure. And I also deliberately made sure the Star Sisters were at the beginning of the year, because I knew that if we sprang this toy on collectors mid-year after they signed up, there might be a little pushback on the price point and getting, 3 shiny pink lady figures. So they were deliberately in the beginning. And they lived on past that. I mean, they've shown up in fan art, they've shown up in comic books, they've shown up at conventions. I think the Sander brothers brought some Star Sister dolls to PowerCon one year, which, they did some amazing research on the line. And they even showed up in the Netflix series, even with Glorybird there. I think reimagined as an owl, maybe? I don't know. I didn't really watch that much of the series. But yeah, the Star Sisters have lived on, and I kind of like to think that Classics helped propel them back into the spotlight. Not taking credit for them, but, we helped.